Good morning, I'm Sean, and welcome to Agni Arms. Well, today's a new day, and we hope to get some more parts hung on the tractor. So let's get started. First part we're going to do here is the bracket that holds the lever that controls the cylinder for the fast hitch. So this is going to go on. Just very simple, just sits right on here and just run 2 bolts up from the bottom. Okay, next part we're going to do that even if you're not restoring a Farmall tractor, it is, in my book, a must-do, must replace. And that is the fan hub. The original design had a bearing in there that you had to oil. And every so many hours, you have to oil it. And if you don't oil it, it'll lock up. That's what happened on my Farmall 100. This is the sealed bearing. You put it on, you never have to worry about it. It is, without a doubt, one of the best parts newer parts you can put on your tractor. However, there's one thing you have to do to change it. As it comes, it's drilled and tapped for 12-20 screws. Go to your local hardware store and try to find a 12-20. You can't. You can find 10s, you can find quarters. No one makes a 12-20. You have to go to Steiner and get these. It's a flathead screw. Flatheads, if you want to torque this down, this is your cooling fan. You have 8 screws. Kind of want to torque them down good. Flatheads are notorious for mushrooming out. These were kind of stuck on there. The head started splitting. And so we want to replace these with hex head cap screws. The problem with doing hex head cap screws is you can't get a 12-20. You have to go to 1/4 inch, and if you're going to 1/4 inch, you're better off going to 1/4 28 than you are 1/4 20, so you can get more threads in there. It's a real easy fix. You're going to use a number 3 drill. You're going to go in, you're going to drill the holes out. All it's going to do is just clean out those threads. And then you go back in and retap it and you're done. It's what I did on the Farmall 100, and it's what I'm going to do on the Farmall 200, and we're going to show you what we do, how we do that here. Okay, so here's the setup I'm using. I don't have this locked down. I have it so it can spin. And because basically going at a slow RPM, I can come down, it'll stay self-centered in that hole, and I can do it that way. If you feel the need to lock it down, you can. Here's the hole I went ahead and did. Basically forgot to start the camera. And you'll see that the 1/4 28 bolts threads down in there real nice and easy. So that's going to allow us to crank it down tighter. One thing I probably would advise doing is after you drill and thread, go in a couple sizes bigger and drill down on these holes, because if you look, you'll see there's a thread on this top plate. Looking at it, it looks like it's solid and it's already tapped through, so it should be okay. Not necessarily needed, but the machinist may say to do that. But we're going to go ahead and we'll do the rest of these holes. So it's going to be drill, rotate, drill, drill, rotate, and then we'll go through and then we'll tap them all. Okay, all the holes are drilled, and you see there's a lot of mess. Anytime you do any machining with cast iron, it is messy stuff. So before we really blow it, we're going to wipe all this off because I don't want the cast iron dust on there. One thing I forgot to mention is how I found the hole location. I put a 174 pin, precision pin in here, and then dialed it in to find where that hole location is. And basically, then I put the drill bit in there, and to get it close, once it gets by feel, you get a little wobble, but then the drill bit will hit that beveled head, and then it'll hold pretty solid as long as you're going slow. So let's wipe this off and then we'll tap. Tap I'm using is a 2-flute 1/4 28 tap by Cleveland. With using cast iron, you get a lot of junk, we shall say. So a 2-flute gives you a lot of room to pack all that junk in there so you can tap straight through. And then also, I don't have it in a tap handle. Actually, I just pulled it off my CNC, and I'm doing this by hand. If this was a more rigid setup and it wasn't free to rotate, I would go ahead and power tap it on the Bridgeport, but Again, I'm just leery of breaking anything cast iron, so we're just doing this by hand and taking our time. So we'll come back when we have it all done. Okay, all the holes are tapped. It would have been a little bit easier with the tap wrench, but we got it done. Basically, the reason I didn't want to use the tap wrench was on my CNC, each tool is in an insert like that, and so the height is pre-programmed. So when I pop the tool in there, the machine knows exactly what the height is. And if I would have popped the tap out to use it in a hand die, I would have had gone back in and measured to set it. I just didn't want to do that. So, oh well, probably would have taken less time than what it did to do it this way, but you know what? It's done. Okay, have the fan running because it's a little hot and humid out here. I'm not air conditioned. So this is the piece that I'll bolt to the front of the engine, which will connect the radiator to the water jacket. And this is what the flywheel bolts to. So we're going to slide it in there, and then there is a washer, looks like this, that'll go on the back. And then there's a nut you put on there and it tightens down. This washer in the middle crushes down enough that you don't have to worry about that bolt in the back really coming loose. Okay, we've gone ahead and tightened that on there. We're going to go ahead and mount this before we put the fan blades on. I'm going to use a very small amount of sealant glue, just like we said, just to hold it on there. And we're going to locate it, pressed it on, whoop, I pressed it on there. And yeah, that'll stick. We'll go ahead and get the bolts and put it on there. Okay, we got the jacket placed here. Not jacket, we should say nozzle or neck, whatever you want to say. We're tightening up the threads a little bit here, then we'll come in and final tighten with our wrench. What's interesting is it called for 1 1/8" bolts. You can't buy 1 1/8" anymore. So I'm using 1 1/4", and same way with the long one there, because it's a little longer. It calls for 2 1/4", 2 1/8", but you can't get 2 1/8". You can only get 2 1/4". So we're kind of seeing how tight we can get these, and yeah, they're getting tight enough. So not sure if bolt nomenclature changed over the years or what, but we're going to go ahead. I have to put a wrench on that one, so let's go ahead and get the wrench. So we're just going to go through, and this one is just fussy enough that, oh, we got to wrench it all the way around. Can't really get the socket head of this one in there, so we get to do it this way. Again, bolt into cast, tighten it as hard as you can with your hand, but don't do the impact gun. Well, you can if you want, but you might strip something out, and this you'd strip out on your block. And last I checked, International isn't making C123 blocks anymore. Okay. Last one. Okay, this one's kind of stuck in no man's land. Okay, let me pause this here. Okay, water pump's on here, and if you look around here, you see some areas here where didn't quite get any paint on. That's okay. When we come back, we'll get those areas again too, as long as like with the bolts and stuff like that. This opening right here, this is for the temperature gauge. On the 100 series, the Super A's, and also on the gauge ran here. On the C models, they ran the gauge back there, and it goes into the bottom opening on there. So this is going to stay open for a while until we get the painting done, because we're not ready to put gauges in. Okay, to mount the fan is fairly simple. You're just going to stick it here on the hub. You're going to line all your holes up. Whoop. And we're going to line all your holes up and we're going to bolt it in. I had to go ahead and drill the fan out. An E drill is a 1/4 inch. I went to an F, so I have about 7/1000 over, a little bit more slipway, just in case stuff was off. But yeah, it should fit on there just fine. So let me go ahead and get some of these bolts started. Okay, so we have the fan mounted on there. Next we got our couple of brackets to a bracket for the fuel tank in the back, and then a bracket to help hold the radiator support on, and then we are getting close to being done as far as parts. Now some of the places we're going to touch up here on the frame, if you remember, this is where the stand was, so we didn't get that. This area right in here, I didn't get primed that well, so I ground the paint, and the paint was coming off fairly hard under this axle we got to get. And then over here on this side we have that pad, and then this area right here didn't get any primer at all. I just covered it with paint, so we took all that off. And then we have the screws and stuff back there that we have to get. So we're going to go ahead and shoot all those areas with primer so the red paint sticks. There's some areas that have red paint, it just needs to be a little bit thicker. We're going to address that later. So now what we're doing is, this is the final shot to get everything on the chassis to look perfect. You're going to see there's some other parts that we've taken off. We're going to shoot primer, and then we're going to come back on and shoot red again. For example, the tree here, we took it off. We want to shoot the bolts with primer so we can hit them with red and the springs, but also here where the lights are at, we're going to prime the brackets, and then we're going to go ahead and mount them, and then we will shoot the brackets with the lights on there, so that way they're all in place. So when the tree goes back on, the lights will be mounted on it, and it'll be ready to be wired and have the bulb, the center parts put back in. So right now we're just in a waiting pattern till the epoxy cooks off. So we'll come back with spraying epoxy. Hi, I'm Sean and welcome to Agni Arms. Well, today is one of the last big pushes as far as getting parts and doing some painting. It's not gonna be everything, but it's gonna be a lot of stuff. Let's show you what we got to prime here. Pulled off the oil pan and the flywheel cover. Got all the bolts and lock washers done. The part I was loathing to do the most is the touch control. Got it done what we could. Some of the touch control we're going to have to wait till we get it back on the tractor so we can move the arms. Have some other parts here for the fast hitch, and then we have the two seat parts, clamps for the light, switch for the lights, the starter switch, and then the light switch, all parts that are going to be primed. And then the other part we have to do today, which is going to be done in sections, a little creative, is the radiator. So we're going to sit back, you're going to sit back, and I'm not going to sit back, but I'm going to go sit here. We're going to degrease all the parts and get ready to prime. So we'll show you some degreasing. It won't be messy for you, and not too much for me. Now, a lot of thought into how I was going to go about and paint this. If I should do it all like this and then put it up, which if I did, then I have to worry about the bolts and come back and get them later. Same way with the flywheel shield. What the plan is to go ahead and prime them, prime this part and this part, and then stick the bolts in like so, and hopefully the longer say, go ahead and shoot them with primer, and then go ahead and bolt it up into place, and then I will paint this part in place. Same way with the shield. Actually, the shield I'm going to paint I'm going to paint it flat, and I'll paint the oil pan. I'll go ahead and I'll hang in. I think that's the way I can balance getting all the screws and stuff done and, you know, having it look decent. So we're going to go through right here as we've done before. Use our degreaser, and pretty sure with all this I've used to clean it off, there's no grease on it, but still we're going to rub it over just to make sure. Ooh, getting a fair amount of dirt and gunk off of it, so it's a good thing. That would prevent the paint from sealing. So yeah, so it's a good thing we're going ahead and doing this. Wiping it off, getting all the dust up, so that way everything sits on the adheres to the paint. Now touch control block. There's no real good way to clean this with these arms. The only way to get it 100% clean, paint off of it and everything, is to take this all apart. It was working very nicely when I started taking the tractor apart. There was no reason to take the touch control block apart. It's not hard to do, but it's just time consuming. So we're just going with it as it is right here. This is a side lower unit where you want to make sure you really get it good and clean, because if it leaked or when you were draining it, I know in my case this is where the hydraulic oil, I thought I had it drained, not all of it was out. Some of it was still leaking and sitting in. So you want to take your time. You don't want to go through the cleaning process and then mounting it to find out later you had a leak. Because if you have a leak, you have a lot of those stuff you have to take before you can get back and fix this. I mean, not a leak, I should say, but paint running. Duh, not a leak. So you want to take your time. So we're just wiping it off. Here, where it was tape, we took the tape off. Still some tape stuck on it, so we'll get that off before we retape it. Side here, we're going to spray paint. It's not going to be the cleanest. It may not stick, but you know, with the big rough cast iron, we're hoping, you know, we get the epoxy to stick inside there. But I mean, where it's at, no one's going to see it, so I'm not too concerned about it. And now we're going to flip it. This is heavy, so you want to be careful. are the sides. This is blocked by the battery. There's a little gap where you see the motor. So it's not a high visibility part, but still we want the paint to stick. Okay, we're going to go ahead, pause it. I'm going to go ahead and wipe down the other parts, and we'll come back and we'll go to the next step. The first part we're actually going to address is the radiator. Now, with the radiator, traditionally people will paint them all black, and that's fine. That's what we're going to do. However, you don't want to just go in and hose down with any black paint on the radiator. You got to take some considerations into what you're doing. The fin area here, and even though you see that area there, the lines are okay, it doesn't leak. The fin area here is where the heat transfer occurs. If you go back in with a heavy black paint, it's basically going to keep the heat inside the radiator, and it's not going to transmit, which is what you want. In order for the heat to transmit, you want to use some high heat paint, like you would use on a grill. It's a lighter paint. It's going to allow the heat to penetrate it and escape, but you still can get the black look. So what we're going to do is we're first going to paint the fins on either side. Now for the other parts of the radiator, where we're not worried about heat transfer, we're going to go ahead and we're going to epoxy them, and then we'll get to the black iron guard paint, because we're also going to do a couple other parts that need black. So let's go ahead and we will paint the fins here. Now when we paint, you're going to be coming in at a 45-degree angle. We're going to hit it this way, we'll spin it around, we'll hit it the other way. Okay? So here we go. Okay, now we're going to spin it around, and you'll notice it doesn't look like it's painted, but it is, and we'll continue. Okay, that's that side. Now let's flip the radiator over. now spin it around. Can had some blockage there, and actually it's spraying a lot better now than it did before. Not sure what it was. Maybe I didn't shake it for the amount of time. We're going to go back maybe and get the other side, because this is spraying a heck of a lot better than it did prior. There, we got black. Now we're going to let that dry, and we're going to go start mixing up the primer, and then come back and address this so we can prime rest of the radiator without affecting the black paint we just sprayed. Okay, went ahead and sandblasted the manifold. Probably would have been good enough as it comes from the factory without sandblasting, but just wanted to make sure the paint sticks. The exhaust pipe they send you, if you can see inside there, comes with I guess it's a primer. It doesn't come off very easily with the sandblaster, but wire wheel takes it right off. So then I sandblasted this pipe. So we're going to go ahead and coat them with POR 15. This is the aluminum color, and it spreads very well. So we're going to show you the manifold here, but then we're going to set the camera down so that I can use two hands on the pipe. So here we go, and we're just putting it on. Oop, getting the tape out of the way. Tape is not wanting to work with us here. So you'll see one little brush, and this is spreading amazing. It's amazingly spreading. So we're just going to take that piece of tape off, and we're going to finish painting. Okay, so we have the manifold painted, we have the exhaust pipe extension painted, and we have the 4 washer and nuts painted. Problem is, it takes 6. So I guess I'll have to hit up the local IH dealer, and I'm assuming they'll for sure have the nuts. Hopefully they'll probably have the washers too. I buy a lot through Steiner because they're cheaper when I'm buying in quantity, but when I need to get a little one-off part here or there, I just go to the local IH dealer, because even though the price is a little higher, I don't have to pay the shipping. So now we're on to spraying red. Okay, before we paint, we're going to talk about a maybe controversial topic. I don't know, a topic that I'm sure a lot of people have different opinions of, and that's gaskets, and how you treat gaskets, and what you should add to gaskets, and what you should use for gaskets. So let's talk about that in reference to the oil pan. Okay, the oil pan has 18 screws that go on it. 18 screws with lock washers. When you tighten up 18 quarter-inch screws with lock washers, and you tighten them tight, that oil pan is not going to move. So when you're applying the gasket to this, you don't need to glue the gasket to the oil pan and then glue it to the tractor, because there's 18 screws there to keep that oil pan in place. And if the oil pan's in place, the gasket will be in place. So with that being said, the oil pan also will need to be removed at some time. And if you glue the gasket to the oil pan and glue it to the tractor, the gasket's not coming off nicely. It'll come off, but it's going to come off in pieces. And so then you're going to have to clean pieces off your tractor and off your oil pan. And if your tractor's real nicely painted, you might need to get some power tools which will scuff up your nice paint. So with gaskets that are going to be replaced or taken off at times, like I did with the front wheel hubs and with the oil pan, do not glue them to the tractor part. Whatever the stationary part of the tractor is, don't glue the gasket to there. Now, as far as gluing it to the other part, you don't need to glue it. A gasket is supposed to breathe, and through most of these gaskets there will be some breathing, but you don't need to glue the gasket down. That gasket is going to be held in place by this 18 screws, bolts sticking up in there. A little bit of glue here or there just to kind of tack it down before you put the bolts in, that's okay, but you don't need to glue it to the part either. Okay, a little bit, okay. Completely gluing it to the gasket, no, not needed. Now the other thing, Permatex. Friends, don't let people use Permatex on tractors. These old tractors are designed to breathe. You don't need an airtight gasket to where nothing gets through, okay? Don't use Permatex, because again, when you have to go to remove it, you got to scrape the shit off, and it's not fun to scrape off. So, no Permatex gaskets, no gaskets where we glue it to the part and the tractor, and if we glue the gasket to the part just a little bit, you don't really need to even glue it, okay? Because over time, it'll stick good enough on its own. So, there, I'm done preaching. Let's get ready to prime. Okay, so we've added a couple more parts to there. We got the starter on there because that, since we're painting black, that's going to go black. So we're going to go and we're going to do some of the touch control, come back to the oil pan stuff, and go around. We're just going to kind of skip around because we have to move parts. We want this to kind of dry a little bit before we have to touch it. So here we go. Okay, so we have these parts done. There's some more of the fast hitch parts which I got cleaned, but we're just going to go with this right now as far as paint these red, because I have the fast hitch. I don't have all the parts cleaned up yet as far as depainted. So we're just going to get this red. This takes care of the chassis parts, and then we'll go from there. We're going to look over the. We're going to move this so it doesn't get damaged, and we're going to look at the fast hitch, the touch control, just to make sure we got everything. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to address the radiator. Now on the radiator, we've already painted this black, and we want to prime everything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some cardboard, and we're going to kind of cut it, the cardboard, tape it to fit that area, and then we'll prime. Actually, instead of cutting, we're just going to try this and see how this works. Do it from this angle. Okay, so as you can see here, got this side painted gray, letting it dry, and then we will come back and get the other side. Okay, all the parts are now primed. We are letting them dry. We're having storms come through the Versailles area. It's supposed to get like 1.5 inches of rain. So it's a little cool and humid. So we're just gonna give the primer extra time to dry because we don't want to smudge it up and have to go back to it. Okay, next thing we're gonna look at is the manifold. On the right you see is the manifold that came with the tractor. This is the standard Farmall 200, 100, and even for the Super C manifold. Some of the Super A's, depending upon if they were the 130. Well, actually, I think they still with 113 still had that manifold. On the right, the left, sorry, is the manifold for the 130, 230, and up. Why do I have that? Well, as you remember, even though this is a 200, that motor has been rebuilt to 230 specs based upon the compression we checked on the very first day. So the previous owner kept the standard manifold, and what was basically happening was the engine's running hot because it was being starved for oxygen. And then it didn't help matters that there was a distillate carburetor on there. Yeah, I'm not sure what was going on. So anyways, we got the proper manifold. Now, it comes from Steiner. It's beautiful cast iron, as you see there, but over time that's going to rust, and we don't want that to happen. We want to keep it nice and pretty. So we're going to coat it with POR 15, high temperature paint. That'll keep it from rusting. And yeah, we should, because it came from the factory, we're probably going to sandblast this first just to make sure that the paint has something to stick to. But first, let's look at the manifold to see the differences. Okay, if you look there at the manifold, you'll see that the one on the top, the 230, has a bigger borehole. That's going to allow more air, more fuel up into the motor. Now, more fuel is not necessarily a bad thing. It burns more fuel, but the gas also is used as it's kind of like a coolant or a lubricant inside also. That's why if you run your motors lean, they often run hot, is because they're not getting all the fuel they would use to actually cool and lubricate. When a motor runs rich, there's a fine balance there. But yeah, ours is definitely running hot. So that's one of the major differences. The other major difference is the size of the exhaust ports. So here are the intakes for the motor, but here are the exhausts, the square ones. There are the round ones. And then if we compare those to the newer one, balance it here. Whoop, you'll see the newer one, everything is much larger. So it has larger exhaust ports also, by about 1/8 of an inch. So what this does is this allows more air to get in and get out of the motor, which running at a higher RPM with a higher compression, it needs. This will help it run better. Not that the motor ran bad, but I could tell it was being starved for air and it was running hot. So this will take care of that. Okay, let's touch up some red paint. Okay, have all the areas touched up on the tractor that are non-stainless screws. So let's go start painting parts. Okay, we have this batch of red parts painted red. It's good because they're supposed to be. You see I got the tree here, and we got parts of the fast hitch and the seat. So we're coming along really well here. And then over here in the tractor, we have all the areas touched up, repainted, ready to be red. So it's all ready to go. So where we're at is, as far as assembly, we can throw the touch control on, and that lets us start mounting the hydraulics. And so pretty much we can start bolting everything to the tractor except for sheet metal, and we're working on that. As you saw, I have the manifold going. There's some areas there I need to touch up on, but yeah, we are, I think, going to be making a lot of progress here. We'll get you some parts bolted up here once they dry. Okay, after letting them sit for a couple hours, we're going to start putting some pieces down. Touch control is where it needs to. It sits, as you see here, screw holes on the bottom sit in these recesses. We're going to bolt it down here in a little bit. We're doing some wiring. We've put the light switch in itself, and we're going to run some of the gauges in and start hooking them up. Okay, first gauge we're going to put in is the thermostat gauge. It's going to go in the bottom position, so let's go ahead and run that through. You need to run it through the box first up to the motor. So the gauge is in its position. Now we're going to do the bracket. Okay, have that tightened in there. We're going to wait and run the cable here. We're going to hook up some more gauges and run the wires when we do the electrical. Next, we got the oil gauge in there. If you remember, the previous owner had the pipe coming out so you could see it from while you were driving. Didn't really like that, so we put it back the way it should be. Next up, the ammeter. Okay, here is the correct ammeter gauge. Originally, when it was at 6 volts and using a generator, this would have been voltage, but when you convert it over to an alternator, you need to make this a ammeter. So this is the one we need. The blue, I know I did not get a blue gauge, that's just the wrapping that goes around that. So we'll get this removed and installed. Okay, we have that installed. Now we got to go back to the tree. Okay, before we go to the tree, we'll show the wiring harness we're using. We got the wiring harnesses from Brillman. Just like Pete said, if you're doing a restoration, they're made exactly for whatever model tractor you have. They look exactly like the original did. And yeah, they give you a much cleaner, professional looking wiring harness than, say, using modern wire. So next thing we have to install is, I kept the original fuse, but they send you a fuse, so we're going to use theirs. To install the fuse, you got to pull the wires off the back. They give you the little spade connectors. 33 is the one that goes on the long end, and then we're going to insert it this way. Okay, we're not wiring up the entire thing. We're just basically trying to get everything off here so we can do black, but we are going to run these wires so we can mount the tree. You'll notice this is a single wire that then splits off into 2 wires, and they got the nice little solder connection here, and it's jointed. Now the problem is this goes up into here, so we're going to have a fun time threading that through. So let's go ahead and get some string so we can do that. Okay, instead of string, I've ran wire. Hopefully this works. I got white going to that side and black going to that side. So what we're going to do is we're going to hook up the wires and hopefully be able to pull them through. When I was taking the tractor apart, one of the things I was looking at was kind of what I thought was the crappy wiring job that the previous owner did. He had the light wires running on the outside, and it just looked kind of bad. Well, I've since figured out why he did it that way. To get the wire done exactly how it was from factory is a royal pain. Let me show you why. you have to run 2 wires down, and I'm not sure if you can see it, split through that little hole there. Now, the issue is with these wires from Brillman, the connectors are nice and big, but they don't want to make that corner, and so you kind of have to, what you need to do here is, as you see, I ran, all I had was yellow ribbon. John Wayne here, she used the yellow ribbon, hooray, hooray. Okay, enough singing. So I used the yellow ribbon, and I fished the yellow ribbon through the arms up to here, tied the wires to it, and now I'm pulling them back through. This is a royal pain. I suggest that if you do this, make sure you tie it tight, because the last thing you want to do is the ribbons. Now, here is kind of how you need to go about doing it, which seems to work, which is kind of what Pete did if you watch, even though he wasn't really talking about it. Get one set of wires down and in the hole and pulled through around the bend and start, so where you can pull it through. Get the other ones through here, and it's going to be just kind of stuck, and you kind of got to use a screwdriver to gently push to help it make it bend. Once it makes the bend, then you tug on your first wire, and that tension in there kind of sucks it down, and then you pull them through. So that's what we're doing right now, is pulling them through. The next problem area you have is the junction of the wires where they splice them together and solder, is getting that around. So you kind of have to pull one through and then do the other, which is what we're doing. We have this one pulled through, it's going nice and easy. Now we just got to get that one through. Okay, so we have the wiring harness, both the power and the ground, pulled through to each side. And while we were doing that, we also painted some of the black parts. The only thing we have left to go black is the main axle. So, thoughts here on the Brillman harness pulling it through. You want to go with the Brillman harness, no questions asked. But there's something you can do that will make that job a lot easier for yourself, which I wasn't able to do. Let me show you. That cross beam pulls out. I'm not able to because the set screws in the back are locked in. The one I can get out, the other one I can't get out. It's stripped, or I'm not sure what it is. But anyways, the reason I say that is if you can get your set screws out and you can pull that center rod out, that hole in there is at most a ½ inch. If you could open that hole up to say 5/8, that would make a world of a difference as far as pulling those harnesses through when you get to the bigger ends. Also, one thing I noticed was I had what looked like to be a cork stuck in the end of mine. Not sure if that was factory or supposed to be there or who put it there, but I pulled it out because I was not able to pull that through. You need to make sure that there's no obstructions in the rest of the length of that pipe, because it's really thick. So we got this stuff pulled through. Now we can hang some more parts. Okay, we're going to go ahead and mount the manifold here. So here, taking the tape off the where everything goes. Okay, got the manifold mounted, and going ahead and putting the bolts on, starting on the inside, working out. As you remember, I only bought 4. I need 6. The other 2 are coming tomorrow. So doing the inside 4 first. I chased the threads and then put never sees on them. Don't ever plan on taking this off, but in case if I do, you want that on there. So let me put the other ones on. One interesting thing about the manifold is this flat surface here. This is Steiner makes this for a number of different tractors. So obviously for mine and for the 230, you're not mounting it to anything, but it's kind of interesting that this is there. It's not sure if it's designed to be flipped upside down and used on another tractor, or I'm not sure really what that's for, but needless to say, we went ahead and coated that. I originally had taped it off, but then realized that, hey, I don't need that as a polished surface, so coated that. Let's go ahead and put the pipe in. Pipe's installed, and that looks really nice. Okay, let's do the air filter next. And we got the air cleaner on there. Decided to change it up, go with the pre-cleaner, kind of like that look a little bit better. One of the last things I wanted to show you here for this segment is how to tighten the main belt coming off the shaft, the fan, and moving the water pump. It's kind of it's not straightforward. It's not hard, but you kind of have to position some stuff. You need a 11/16 wrench on the flat back there. That wrench itself, the weight of the wrench sitting here will be enough to hold it still. So you can get to the back nut back here with a 15/16. Now you need to use a screwdriver or a pry bar or something to get in there and lift up on the pulley. It doesn't need to be super tight. Now, as far as the back nut, you need it loose enough that you can slide the fan up, but not so loose that the fan sits in there kind of whopper-jawed. So here I have it tightened just enough that it'll snug it. I'm pulling down with a fair amount of force, and if I press on the belt, it's tight, but I get a little bit of deflection. So now, holding it like this, I'm going to go in with the wrench and tighten up the back nut. If you have a second person, it works because coming in on the other side is a little easier, but it can be done from this side. It's tightened up now, but the other way I do it is I'll just reach around, basically chest into the radiator, so I can reach it around from the other side. So there is that. Okay, like I said before, a lot of times I film these over multiple days, and this one's been no different. So let's show you where the tractor now stands at the end of this episode. Going ahead and bolted on the radiator, have that all painted up black, and attached the alternator here. So have the arm, notice it's coming off that corner bracket of the mount there. You saw me tighten up all the belts. Have the manifold on, and have the air cleaner on with the pre-cleaner. That's going to look really nice with the hood. And we also have the lights. Let's get a little bit closer look in there. Lights are all hooked up. You saw me run the wires through there. Have the throttle quadrant all put together. And then we've bolted on the main hydraulic line. We have that bolted on. We still have the distributor to put on and all the ignition equipment. So that still needs to be painted, and we've battened down the touch control. So we're sitting there pretty good. The wire for the temperature sensor, we do need to route that, but we're going to wait till all the electrical work is done. So that's the end of this episode for putting parts on the tractor. Hopefully you found this interesting. We're getting ready to make the final push as far as all the parts that need to be cleaned. There's all the sheet metal and some of the remaining fast hitch parts. There's the big part right there. We're going to get those cleaned up and get them painted, along with the fenders in the upcoming episodes. So hopefully you found today interesting and exciting, and come back again. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day. Goodbye.